Hello. Today we would be discussing about Plato's essay Ion. Ion is an interesting, essay work by Plato. It discusses regarding the nature of poetry and also the nature of rhapsody. We'll get into the details of the essay later, but a little bit about the nature of the essay. It's a it is very popular among Greek writers. That is, it's in the form of dialogues. So dialogues is that there are two people who are talking, and one person asks a question, and other person answers, or in any manner. Most of the time, dialogues are like one person has something to say, and they keep on saying, and other person. Oh, yeah, 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 that is true. So true to God's, that is right. So they just say that and, so agree with the other person. But, this technique has quite a bit of benefit that, it can be used to analyze things much better. And so that is why this particular technique is employed by Plato in many of his work. Of course, Eon as well as the Republic, which we will be discussing later. And Eon, this particular work, of course, Socrates, teacher of Plato, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. So the lineage of teacher and students. Socrates is considered to be the master of Plato, who is master of Aristotle anyway. So Socrates is the major speaker in this particular essay. But so did Socrates write this? Absolutely no. Did it really happen? No. So it is Plato utilizing Socrates as a character to convey his thoughts. It's a style of writing which was prevalent during the time. So instead of considering this as the Socrates work, we should consider this as a Plato's work. And, for sure, this is Plato's work. Or at least, as per information available, is a Plato's work anyway. So, whatever presented here is what Plato wants to convey rather than, what Socrates wants to convey. So, let that be very clear. Socrates is the character in the essay, but the writer of this essay is Plato. So, and regarding timeline, one important thing that we need to understand is Eon was written before he wrote Republic. So that is why, in the Republic, the parts where he speaks about poetry, so, that is much more developed, than what we see here. But however, you can see there are his thoughts on poetry being like, in a path of saying that, okay, poetry is something which is counterproductive. So, so that is, just to let you know that, it's a Eon was written long before he wrote Republic, maybe couple of years, I don't know for sure, but so there is a little bit of gap, and but the some of the ideas, they origin here, and it is developed little later. And what does this essay do? This essay majorly works on the idea of poetry, representing poetry, and there are parts of humor involved and everything. So let's try to get into the essay. Of course, though I wanted to discuss this essay in detail, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to pick out the major points, and I'm going to discuss the same. That's all. And I think that is more than enough for our understanding. But I would still encourage you to read a simpler English translation of Eon. Anyway, so what is happening in this essay? In this essay, a rhapsode called Ion and Hope, and Socrates are having a conversation. So, it starts in a dramatic manner that, the rhapsode Ion is, he is marching in the direction of, Socrates, and, Socrates stops him and, have a conversation with him. And it's a dramatic event, and yeah, and let's see what happens. Before that, rhapsode. Who is a rhapsode? Rhapsode is someone who sings and plays poetic work in the sense epics. So that is a rhapsode. Rhapsode is a person like who recites epic, who sings epic, and sings is not just in the manner of like rhythm, but also with emotions. There's a little bit of acting and all that. So I mean, we have a similar tradition, in India, of course, and so I don't know what it is called in different parts of India, but in Karnataka, in Kannada, we call Gamaki. Gamaki is a person who takes up a literary text, an epic text, and reads it in a manner which is both meaningful and musical, right? So that is, similar to that is a rhapsode. And, and Greeks used to have contests for rhapsodes, They used to have contests where, there were competitions and, so people have singing battles against each other and, one would be victorious. And this Eon, the rhapsode, was very much celebrated in Greece by then, and he was quite popular. If you read about it, and you'll find out he was quite popular, and he had already won you know many prizes, and he was about to visit one more competition, and that is where Socrates stops him and have conversation with him. And the Socrates has definitely certain ideas in his mind, and he wants to talk about it, but he doesn't directly jump into that. First he have a casual conversation. Oh, what are you, what do you sing, and all these things. He has a casual conversation. He makes other person very comfortable before bashing him. So bashing him in the sense, of course, not physical, but intellectual bashing, like so that is going to happen. And so first he and it is very intelligently written to say that you feel almost that oh, okay, Socrates is very interested. He is open minded. He wants to respect this rhapsode. But as Socrates speaks, you understand that he has already thought about it, and he already has many of the answers. Still, he asks some questions to, like elicit an answer from the rhapsode. So the conversation starts by so the conversation gets serious when Socrates asks the question. So you are known for singing about Homer. Why not other poets? There are other poets as well. Like, there is Hesiod, and, so there are other poets as well. Why do you not, why do you not sing those poets? Why are you speaking about Homer? So this question is interesting because we know that, Plato loved Homer. Plato enjoyed Homer nonetheless, but still, he's asking that why not some other poets? Because he has of course he has a reason why he's asking this question. He has some ideas in his mind. So, and so Rhapsode is little taken aback by this question. Like, he's wondering why is he asking this question. He says that Homer is the best poet, so that is why I know Homer. Other poets are not as good as him, so I do not know them. So Socrates asked this question, like, how do you judge poetry, right? So, so you, are you a poet? No. he doesn't write poetry. If you are not a poet, on what grounds do you judge poetry with? Like, in the sense, for example, if you are I mean, if you are a good, if you are a doctor, right? You can say, okay, this is the medicine you have to give. And, some other doctor might have some advice for the, medicine as well. They might say that, okay, this is the right thing to do, this is not the right thing to do. But if you are not a poet by yourself and you say that, I know Homer is the best poet, not the others, on how do you decide? Who can be the judge? So this question was raised by Socrates, and yeah, so of course, this makes a rhapsode think, and he doesn't actually have an answer. And Socrates says why this is the case. So he don't know why it happens, and Socrates gives an answer because he is already prepared. He has already prepared for an answer. So Socrates gives a brilliant idea that, he asks a question like, so you are able to convey Homer in a beautiful manner, you know, because you are inspired. You're inspired by Homer. And Eon, without any hesitation, he says, yes, 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 you are right. I am inspired by Homer. That is why I can sing Homer, in a very beautiful manner, not other poets. So, of course, Socrates doesn't give much importance to this, but still, he continues, his discussion on, this inspiration. He says that, rhapsodes are inspired by poets, right? So that is, even you agree. And we have to understand that poets are inspired by, where do poets get their materials from, right? So poets get their materials from God, right? That is the God who inspires writing in poetry. So this idea was prevalent in Greece by then. So that is why we have muses, the concept of muses. If you have read Paradise Lost, you would definitely have encountered the concept of muses, and their origin from Greece and all that. So Greeks actually believed that the writing. So if Homer is just a scribe, so he is a person who wrote, and for him to write, it was the muses who gave him an inspiration. So they actually believed that the writers and poets are inspired by gods. So rhapsode is inspired by writer, and writer is inspired by God. Okay, this particular pattern is, if you have read Republic, this pattern is very, I mean, you immediately understand what this pattern is. But at this point, I think even Plato has not yet, has cracked this particular relation. But when we go to Republic, we're going to discuss this. So, so Rhapsode is inspired by, poet. Poet is inspired by God, and poets are interpreters of what divine inspiration. So they whatever the divine inspiration provides them, they interpret it, and they produce it. So poets are the divine interpreters, and rhapsodes are interpreters of these poets. And so the primary reason why some poets, many of the poets can write about only one, particular style of writing or one particular area of writing. For example, Homer could write only about history. What was considered to be history? Of course, whether you call it history or mythology is purely, dependent on, like, how you look at it. But yeah, so Homer wrote only on what he considered as history, and epic. So so he wrote two great works. No doubt, it is unparalleled. But so his, I mean, he did not write about other things, right? So many of these writers are similar. They are able to produce one good work. That's all. They're not able to produce other works. And so even when they produce multiple works, it is always about one particular area, right? And so that is because they have received inspiration from gods related to only those things. So that is why Plato, in the sense, Socrates says that that poets can write about only one particular area. Similarly, rhapsodes are able to interpret only one poet, because only those poets inspire him, right? So only those poets inspire rhapsodes. And so that is why they are able to I mean, they are able to interpret those poets. So one poet, those, in the sense, it's not multiple, it's one poet. Some other rhapsode, it might not be Homer, it might be some other poet, and so on. So the idea here is very clear. So Plato says that poetry is an act of inspiration, right? And that is the most important thing which we can understand here. Of course, other whether it is Greek gods and all these things are not really important for us. For us, it is very clear the underlying matter of Plato. He is that poetry is an act of inspiration. It is not something like a craft. And he continues, and he explains it, how it works. So when Plato explains, Socrates explains that poetry is inspiration, as well as rhapsode is inspiration. Ion is very happy. Yes, 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 you are right. So he is very happy, and he doesn't understand things which happens between the lines. So what do I mean by the between what do I mean by between the lines? So if you are to say a certain performance or certain actions are purely is a matter of inspiration, and inspiration is not in your hands, that means that you have no part in that particular action. Like it is not that you are skilled, it is not that you are talented, it's just because you are inspired, you are producing it. So Eon doesn't understand, and he is happy. Yes, 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 you are right. It is the inspiration which acts. So clearly, I mean, Plato loved to do this. He loved to portray students of Socrates as dumb fellows. That is his other students, of course, not himself, but his other students as dumb fellows. And Eon is also considered very dumb here, though he is not a student of Socrates. So, he's Socrates is, what Socrates says, Eon doesn't read between the lines, he doesn't understand. He says, yes, 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 yes. And he remembers the times when he was very much emotional when he was producing the rhapsody, that is, when he was singing. So he was very inspired, and he used to cry, and he used to get what we say as natural responses, which we find, like when you're excited, something's happened, and all that. So so he's saying that yes, you are right. And when I'm singing, you can practically see that I am being moved by the work which is presented. I am being moved by the poetry which is presented in front of us. So absolutely true. so for one example I can remember from Iliad is lamentation of when Pericles dies, right? The hero Achilles, he cries, quite a lot, and so that is considered as very emotional segment of the work Iliad. So of course, it is not just Eon or Plato who are talking about it, and it is well known that so these rhapsodes when they sing, they get emotional, and Socrates asked a very interesting question. So, you write about Homer, you interpret Homer, right? You say that, you are able to produce, you interpret Homer in a very interesting manner. So he says yes. And, he asks a question. So if you are, saying, if you are able to interpret Homer's works, that means, you should understand what is in Homer's work, right? And he says, yes, that is true. And, he says, what about the things which you have no knowledge of? And Yon is lost here. What do you mean by things which you have no knowledge of? And he gives example, like for example, so there are description of chariot driving. There are description of divination. Divination is fortune telling, and so these are the things which which occurs in the work of Homer, right? So when you are talking about these things, do you possess these knowledge, right? Do you know about driving? Do you know about divination? And he says, no. Of course I don't know. I have not studied medicine. I have not studied the chariot driving, or I have not studied divination. So Eon admits that he doesn't know. And he still says that yeah, but I don't know about other things, but I understand the art of war making. I know what a general does. I might not know what doctor does, or a charioteer does, but I know what a general of a military does. So that is I'm able to interpret the those portions very well. So, Socrates asked a very interesting question. If you know the art of war making, why are you not a general yet? If why is that, no one has appointed you as general? And Eon, is completely, lost, and he is like, how do I answer this question? And he tries to reply by saying that, oh no, 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 I'm a foreigner, and for a foreigner, that so these city states do not give any, important positions like general. So, but so Socrates says that no, 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 that is not the reason why you have not been general. So all you have, learnt about war making is through reading. You have practically no knowledge about war making. So you just have read couple of things related to what war making. That is why you know. So, and he says that, so this, you do not have a real knowledge about the things which you speak of. So he makes a very interesting point here. So, one thing about Socrates is that, he is not explaining anything in detail. So he considers his readers as, knowledgeable readers, and, he leaves it for us to understand. So what he is trying to say here, he is trying to say here that, see these poets, they write about all the things in the world, right? So in a particular work, they write about the society, they write about medicine, they write about war, they write about gods, and all these things. In fact, this issue comes, so if you have no experience of gods, how can you write about gods, right? So but poets write about gods. How can these people write about something which they know nothing of, right? So this is a question which, he is posing here. How can these people write about, war making? How can these people write about, driving a chariot? So that is the question which he is raising. And, he asks a question, Socrates, if this is the case, you know, would you consider yourself as inspired or dishonest? Right? So very important question, right? So the art of poetry and, reproducing poetry, that too, not writing by yourself, reproducing poetry. So, like, is it an act of inspiration or dishonest? Just before he told, he started by saying that, you are inspired when you say. Now he is asking, like, is it an inspiration or dishonesty? And Eon, he doesn't, as I've told you earlier, Plato would love to make these characters dumb. And, he has no understanding of, what Socrates has asked. He says, yes, 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 you're right, it is inspiration. Whereas, Socrates clearly is asking a question, but it's a rhetorical question. It's saying that, it's being dishonest, right? You don't know about the things, but you write. You are being dishonest is something, is what he's clearly saying. But, Eon is not smart enough to understand it. And, he says, yeah, 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 you are right. It is inspiration. So, but Socrates is not going to mind all his response, and he continues to make his argument that this is quite interesting thing. He says that genius is often said to be sudden, it is spontaneous, and it almost looks like a gift of nature, right? So I mean, it is not never like a genius act can be planned, and poetry is something of that sort, right? And I think this particular statement of Plato or Socrates, however you would consider it, is definitely something which is observable even today, right? So if you have seen a musician composing, and you would really understand, like it is at that moment, some idea comes to that person, and suddenly things flow into from his hands, mouths, whatever. And so that is how a genius act is performed, and poetry is an act of one such act. And so that is why according to Socrates, it is never an act of skill, it is never an act of mastery, right? So it is unconsciously, it comes to you, and you will produce it, so he is sticking on to the idea that poetry is more of inspiration, and it is not something that is with that goes with reason and facts, right? So it is never like it is so it is basically unreal, it is not reasonable, it is unreal. So I mean, this helps us to understand the later argument by Plato in his next work, Republic, where he is very much against poets. Here, you can see that, the moment he says unreal, you understand that, okay, so Plato has something against poets. Yeah? Plato has something against poetry itself. So that, you encounter it in Republic, no doubt. And, he is very clear that, so uh, when a writer writes a work, so it is an unconscious act, right? So it is majorly, the lines come to him, and he writes it. That's all. So he doesn't think about it. He doesn't reason with it, and there is no basis of logic which produces it. Like, and so that is why it doesn't have its mastery. It is not skill dependent. It is majorly inspiration driven. So So that is why, so their works, they have no knowledge of things, and they produce it. So, I mean, does Plato actually believe it? It doesn't appear so. But, this is what he is trying to say in front of Eon. And, for readers, what he is trying to say? For readers, he is trying to say that, see, poetry is an act of sudden emotions, sudden feelings, and it is not something to be relied upon. And so that is, so that he expands later in his work, of course. But let us come back to this text. And he says that if writers, when writers write, are they able to critique it? Are they able to say what is right in their work and what is not right in their work? They'll never be able to do it, right? So they'll never be able to find it out. And so that is why he wants other, writer wants other people to speak about their works, right? So this is a very interesting again, something which might be true. Right, and so he says that this is the reason why you can't claim it as a craft. So the implication here is that you claim yourself to be a champion and all that. It does that prize actually do you actually deserve that prize? Do you actually deserve all that glory which has come to you? Because it is not something which you have achieved, it is not something which you have figured out. It is not something which you have got mastery in, but it is something which happened to, which just happened to you. Right. So you got a little bit of inspiration and you are be able to produce it. Of course, Socrates is a nice person, as per the presentation of Plato. And he doesn't say this, but he makes readers understand it through the these subtext. You have to read between the lines to understand it. So finally, so he says that, so these singing of the work is something that is, in the realm of imitation. It is something which is, it's an imitation. So, writer, is the someone who produce it, right? So there is a, he's a producer. And, a rhapsode is someone who imitates it. And that's all rhapsode does. And that's all singers do. And, they are imitating what has been produced, right? And here is where Socrates stops his discussion, because there are much more things going on his mind. And that is some that is something which we see in Republic, not in this particular text. But this particular idea of imitation is 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 the most important thing which we are going to discuss in Republic. So finally, he says that so these poets really do not have a great wisdom, so they do not have great knowledge about things. They are not master of philosophy. They are just they are just a channel of inspiration. And that is that is the only great merit which you can give to the poets. And so this is how, so this is where the major portion of the argument ends. And so he continues, Eon doesn't seem to be affected by any of the things which Socrates say. But so this is the primary idea of this particular essay. So just just reminding few things. So one of the major things which he speaks about is uh, so writing, the act of writing and the act of singing being driven by inspiration. So that is something which he established in the beginning. Then, he speaks about how they do not actually have the knowledge of what they are speaking about. And, how they are able to, so the limitation of their areas, is purely because that is the only thing which comes to them. That is the only things which are delivered to them by higher power. And so the higher power here speaks of inspiration. So their work, even what they write, they themselves do not know what the knowledge of the things which they write about. So it is absolutely not real. And it is not something which can be applied on the real world. So the way he says that, so if you know about war making, why are you not general yet, right? So that question, like so that is the major idea. Then he speaks about how it is purely an imitation. It is not a pure knowledge, it's an imitation of the things. So he doesn't completely expand on this idea, but he has got the initial threads of this idea which he is going to expand later. So this is what I would like to discuss about Eon. I hope it was understandable. Thank you.